Yeah. You must have probably brought it last week, not knowing that I wasn't going to be here. Good morning.
If I sound like I'm out of breath, I'm out of breath. Just dawned on us that we hadn't gotten communion set up, so we have three workers frantically at the job, or four in the kitchen. And if you see these people coming through with
Pay no attention.
offerings, no, that's all right. You can wave at them even. Just don't expect them to drop what they have and wave back. That doesn't work too well. We have birthdays. Alice, you made the paper this morning for a birthday on the 7th. Sandy Brunson's on the 7th. Karen Johnson and Jay are on the 9th. Linda Lang on the 10th, right? And Aiden Reek on the 11th.
And Bob's is on.
Didn't get his in here right away. What?
Bob's on the 12th.
Bob.
Steve.
Really?
But that's next.
the
That'll be
week
next
after.
year. Yeah, let's not get carried away here.
Yeah. As it is, we'll probably sing to Aiden 2 weeks in a row. We can't get carried away with these things. Well, I guess we could. Wouldn't hurt anything. Okay. Regular announcements, as I can see here. Does Is anybody thinking that they're too ill to get up and move around and shake hands this morning? Okay, any other announcements for the good of the order? All right, well, let's take a few minutes and move about and greet and welcome each other to this time of worship. Well, we'll do that in a minute.
Chevy, good to see you, sweetheart. I'm Jake. Good to see you.
Before I put pants on.
There we go. Thanks.
And actually, I went and got a new bottle.
And now that you've all gotten up and you've exercised your lungs and everything, now we'll sing happy birthday. Not that I forgot or anything. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Ramos. Happy birthday. Go ahead and be seated. I have a little insert this morning. A few words of thanks for your immense generosity over the holidays. I really appreciate that. It's very nice, and I don't know why. I know it happens every year, but it still is a kind of a surprise, and it's a nice one. So thank you very much. That's our little way of saying things. Thank you. Yes. Actually, in the tradition of the church over the centuries, the pattern has been to parade down the center aisle with the elements, the wine and the bread and everything. But we're sort of doing that this week, just kind of climbing up through the hidden alleyways of the church. But it's nice. I appreciate everybody stepping in and helping.
What happened to the candles?
The candles I tried to light, and the wicks are not even to be seen. Yeah, well, I can see one, but you can't get a flame on it, so we're going to have to work on them.
Okay. You want me to come out and
I'll work on one with my jackknife after church.
Yes.
I can work on it right now.
Yeah, might as well.
What?
They might as well. Just jackknife them.
What?
You go ahead, and I'll just look on.
I have a lighter if you need.
Okay, John. We had in seminary, we had a worship and music class, and one of the things we studied there was design of worship centers. And one of the professors said, we should have done with all this fancy stuff, covering up. He says the best kind of architecture is one where you see the heating pipes and the air conditioning pipes, and there's no decoration, and so that's what we're doing today. We show you how the communion is prepared and brought up, and show you how the candles are maintained. We're just doing all this behind the scenes stuff in front of the scenes today. So
Just like how it's done.
this is how it's done. Yes. We could be on television with this song and dance, couldn't we? Okay, now that we've done our friendly things and we're in the maintenance of maintenance things, we'll see if we can get our ducks in a row and get called to worship. God is our shelter and our refuge.
A helper close at hand in time of need.
Indeed. Our first hymn is 617, I Come With Joy. Let's stand and sing that together. 617.
I come with joy to meet my Lord, forgiven, loved, and free. In my wonder to recall His life laid down for me. His life laid down for me. I come with Christians far and near to find His all I will. The unity of love in Christ communion bread. In Christ communion together and together now we'll go our different ways. And as His people in the world we'll live and speak His praise. We'll live and speak His praise.
And let's remain standing and turn to our affirmation, the Canadian affirmation, 83. Oh, there is light.
Just give it time.
It's working on it. It's a little tiny flame, but it's going. I can take a picture on my phone and walk around and show you. Yeah. Takes a spark to keep a fire going, right? Okay. Let's join together. We are not alone. We live in God's world. We believe in God, who has created and is creating, who has come in Jesus, the Word made flesh, to reconcile and make new, who works in us and others by the Spirit. We trust in God. We are called to be the church, to celebrate God's presence, to love and serve others, to seek justice and resist evil, to proclaim Jesus crucified and risen, our judge and our hope. In life, in death, in life beyond death, God is with us. We are not alone. Thanks be to God. So for gifts great and small, we pray. Let's pray. Eternal God, in our coming together in this place, we bring with us the many, many things that are part pray for those who are struggling with issues of health. Pray that Linda can get her foot healed. Offer prayers of thanks that her heart exam and everything went really well. We keep Ernie and his family in our prayers as he faces his surgery on the 7th, and we offer thanks to you for Nick's amazing recovery from the events of the last weeks, I should say. Lift up the Arlen Radke family, the people who have journeyed into Pennsylvania, their entire family, the ones who have died, the ones who have gathered to mourn and celebrate their lives, and the little one at home being cared for lovingly. Lift up Dr. Art and pray for him as he moves through his bladder cancer treatments. We pray for Earth's people, those who are struggling in South Africa for adequate water, for those who are still rebuilding from hurricanes, wind, fire, war, and hunger. We pray that somehow, as people of your earthly family, we might be able to figure out how to get along. As we've said before many times, how to disagree, and disagree we will, for we are vastly different, but do so without being disagreeable to the point of going to war. That within our own legislatures, national and statewide, that we might be able to keep focused on why we're gathered and for whom we work and for the general welfare and peace and health of all of them. And we thank you for the joys in our lives. The anniversaries, the birthdays, the words, the communications from friends, some friends for a long time, others fairly new. For the concern of our church family, one for the other, and for the community. And we thank you for the little animals in our lives, and for the joy they bring. Hear us now in these next moments, as each one of us turns to you. God, we gather in the presence of one another in the name of Jesus. We lay down the realities of our lives. We offer our joy, love, and laughter, that they might be made holy. We surrender bitterness and worry to be made whole again. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
It only takes a spark to get a
Yeah.
I know I can see him, I just ignore him. Kathy, did you have another reminder of some kind? Yes, it only takes a spark. And John with a handy knife to get a fire going. Becky and Charlene, and I get this terrified look on their face. In addition to the tree out there that you change and people notice all the time, and that we don't just have standing looking lonely out in the front hall, would you two help with communion this morning? Okay, thank you. I ran across some of the neatest stuff in my reading this week, and I thought I should share this. Well, then I copied some over and thought, well, I'll work on this, and then it got longer and longer. And so I eliminated about 80% of it. And the reading from the ancient writings is 4 verses, actually 5, from the Gospel of Mark, 1st chapter. Early in the day, Jesus rose and went out to a deserted place and there prayed. Simon and the others tracked him down, interesting, tracked him down and said, "You know, they're all out searching for you." And Jesus answered, "Let's go to a nearby village. I came to proclaim the good news there too." So he got throughout Galilee to their synagogues in the various villages, proclaiming the good news and casting out demons. I read brief passages like that, and they're familiar passages, and still I'm moved to pray, Lord, open our hearts and minds to the power of your Spirit, that as Scripture is read and your word proclaimed, we might hear with joy what you say to us today. Amen. There was a cartoon, a Peanuts cartoon, and one of them was saying, I just hate it. I have things I want to do, and people keep interrupting me. I just can't get anything done because people are always wanting to talk to me. It might have been Snoopy, their dog. He had things he wanted to do, lay around, sleep, eat. But people always wanted to play, go for a walk, whatever. Anyway. Used to go to a lot of clergy meetings. We had small group meetings, cluster meetings of clergy. And we not only had them with the Methodist clergy, but in most communities we had a ministerial group. And we'd meet in different churches every month. And one of the primary topics was, I'd like to get a lot of things read. I'd like to get a lot of things done. I'd like to blah, 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 blah. But people keep coming in as though I'm not doing anything at all, and they keep interrupting me. So I did some thinking about that and some reading about it, and it dawned on me, which, didn't take a lot of reading, to realize that most pastors kinds of things that go on. People want to come in and talk. And if you didn't have any interruptions, why would you be there? Well, they wanted to keep his business hours. They wanted to go to work at 9, get off for lunch at noon, go back at 1, read for a while, go out, see a few people, and go home. Well, that's not bad if you can do it. But they wanted more time to work on their sermons. I actually had a professor in seminary one time that said, you should have an hour of study for every minute you preach. I thought, first of all, there aren't enough hours in a week for anybody who preaches for half an hour. I mean, you just can't, you can't do that and eat and sleep too. So that didn't make a lot of sense. But most of our professors realized that they weren't the only one teaching things, but that there were a lot of things that you had to learn. And most of us were in little churches here and there too that we had some responsibility for. One of the best experiences was the real church in the real world under real time and all the interruptions. Jesus had very little time alone. He knew he couldn't live without God. If he was going to give everyone who wanted something from him, he had to replenish himself. Draw from the stores of wealth and richness and spirituality provided to him by God. He knew he couldn't live without prayer. In a book entitled The Practice of Prayer, Albert Belden said, prayer may be defined as the appeal of the soul to God. Not to pray is to not add God to our resources. We went to a funeral last year or the year before of a dear friend, an older woman, and the pastor started out in the back of the church proclaiming the word, and about fell out of my pew. I thought, might be another funeral coming to keep that up. And then he wandered down the aisle, ahead of the casket, and the family. And all he did was introduce other family members that talked. He didn't do much. He didn't say anything. He didn't have a sermon that amounted to anything. Someone else did that. He actually asked one of his lay people at a meeting we were all at together, how do you know what to preach on Sunday after Sunday? And this man was a pastor appointed to a church. And I thought, what do you do? Get a post office course on how to be a minister or something? Or, it was embarrassing. But he wasn't drawing on the spiritual resources that come through prayer, that come through Bible study, that come through relating to people, even. Not to pray is to not add God to our resources. In prayer, we invite God to feed our mental powers. It's amazing the insights that can come to us in prayer, even. Things at times we wonder, how did I ever forget that? Or, did I ever know that? Or, gosh, look what I came up with. Or, I don't know where that came from, but that's good stuff. Spiritual impact of God, I think, in our lives. Jesus knew this. He knew that if he was to meet people, he first must meet God. If prayer was necessary for Jesus, the question obviously is, how much more is it necessary for you and me? I think sometimes pastors get so busy, so organized, that they forget their own spiritual development, their own spiritual life. It's kind of like, well, I got my degree from seminary, I've been approved by the Board of Ordained Ministry, I've been ordained by the conference, blessed by the bishop. What more do I have to do? It's a lot like confirmation. The thing that I've told kids at confirmation at the service where we received them as members. I said, you guys feel like you really accomplished something. You know, whether it was a 2-year program or 1-year program or a 4-month program or whatever it is that we did. I said, you feel like you've really accomplished something. Got through that finally. I said, well, I've had the same feeling sometimes. We got through that one finally. But I said, the only thing that's happened is you guys are like a plane that's on the runway. The engines are starting to warm up. You're just beginning to take off. You haven't arrived anywhere yet. And that's something pastors have to remember. You can have degrees all over the place. Somebody said you can keep going to school, learning more, getting more recognition. It's kind of like death by degrees. Chinese water torture. You know, you just keep in all this education. You think you really know something. And you might know a lot of things, but unless you've been relating to people, unless you've been relating to God, what do you know? A lot of good stuff, but not enough. There was no way Jesus could shut the door and be alone, though. People were seeking him out all the time. To have time and peace for himself, it was just about impossible. The beginning of this translation, Simon and the others tracked him down and said, tracked him down. He probably was wandering off between some buildings in this little town looking for a quiet place and found a tree and was sitting under the tree, maybe dozing, maybe praying. And he could almost hear him coming down the narrow passageway. Hey, maybe he's down here. I bet he's sitting under that tree. Yeah, you can see from here to get there. At last we found him. We tracked him down. And he might have thought, I don't know if that happened or not, but it could have. And he probably was thinking, don't I ever get any time alone? Conscious as he was of his own weariness and exhaustion, however, he was still more conscious of the insistent cry of people. So when they came to him, he rose from his knees to meet the challenge. Prayer will never do our work for us. What it will do is strengthen us for the work before us. The work which really must be done, not just by pastors or people that pray your socks off, but all of us. I know Isaac always used to get the kick out of me saying, this is the prayingest church I ever remember. He says, what do you mean? You say that a lot. Why do you say that? I said, because it's true. Most churches don't pray the way this church prays. I said, and that phrase came to mind, that practically pray our socks off around this place. So when you ask for prayer in this place, people pray. It's a neat thing. But it won't do our work for us. It just helps strengthen us to do what we have to do. Jesus set out then from that point on a preaching tour of the synagogues of Galilee. And this preaching event or time was marked by 3 ways that he approached his work. He didn't separate words and actions. He never separated body from spirit, body from soul. He never separated earth from heaven. He tied them together. You are where you are. He didn't separate words and actions, never assumed that talking about it, urging people to do it, got the action done. Charlie Brown and Snoopy and Linus were walking along wrapped up in their winter coats, and Snoopy, their dog, was sitting on the sidewalk, kind of shaking, and the boys walk up. Hi, Snoopy, be of good cheer. And the dog looked at him, what? And then they walked on their way, and he kept looking with this question mark over him. Just saying it wasn't doing the dog any good. Words and actions were good. Mary Emerson Fosdick told of a student who was so enthused about his learning, he bought the best books, the best equipment, a special study chair with a special book rest to make study easy, and then sat down in the chair and went to sleep. When we only speak words of good things that must be done, but don't act to do them, we're very much like the student. seminary in Ohio, we finally opened the second floor of the library, and a friend of mine and I helped put all the shelving together and move all the books, and part of our reward for our labors was to have each of us have one of the study rooms that they had. They had 8 study rooms. And we had our own key for it, we put our own books in it, and that was our spot. So that was kind of cool. It was very tempting to take a nap occasionally. And I probably did. Not very often. I'm not too inclined to just fall asleep like that, but there were times. When we only study words, speak good words and good things, but don't act on them, we don't get anything done, do we? Secondly, he never separated soul and body. Some Christians over the centuries have said the body doesn't matter, but we're really, in reality, and we know it, we're both body and soul. Christianity seeks to redeem the whole person, not just one part. It's true that people starve, live in hovels, in distress and pain, and still know God's love, but that's no reason at all for leaving them in those places, if we can do anything about it. Missions to war-torn areas or areas where people have suffered from natural catastrophes or primitive cultures which just don't have anything. Missions to these people don't only take Bibles, they take schools and hospitals and education and medicine. It's just wrong to talk about helping with human need as if it were an option, separate from the Christian message, which preaches and works for the good of people's bodies as well as the good of their souls. Sometimes that's run amok. There was a common thing in the early missionary work in China. I had a friend, Bliss Wyant, who was a missionary in China and got thrown out by the Chinese at the same time Chiang Kai-shek was run out of the country to Formosa. But Bliss said we tried to encourage the Chinese people in the villages to come to church. And he said, we even provided meals after church. And so he said, what we discovered we were doing was we were creating rice Christians. They came for the rice, they came for the meal. And a lot of them learned, a lot of them were converts, a lot of them, whether they were converted or not, took seriously the message of Jesus. But there were always some that were just there for the treats, for the meat, or the rice. But there's a bigger picture, he said. We work for their bodies, but we also work for the good of their souls. And you know, it's that thing, you know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Kids on the UN tour one year after we had a horrible trip. We had a van breakdown in front of Bellevue Hospital in Manhattan, which should have been a sign. But anyhow, it broke down there, it broke down in Pennsylvania, it broke down in Indiana, and it broke down in Chicago. Finally, I called the garage in Sioux Falls, and I said, your van, one of your vans, is in Chicago, Joliet actually, and we're leaving it here. I said, I'm flying half of my group back home, and I don't care what you do with this van. So, by the time we got back to Sioux Falls, 3 days late, because of all the problems, it was a little hard to keep track of what we were actually supposed to be doing, what we were about. But I'll tell you one thing, the little group pulled closer together, mission to one another, ministered to one another. It was a neat thing. People that wanted to be home by a certain time said, oh, someone else can take my place on the plane and fly home if they want to. It was a neat thing. We do things that are good for people's bodies as well as for the good of their souls. It's not easy all the time. So he never separated words and actions, bodies and souls, and he also never separated earth and heaven. There are those so concerned with suffering that they work only to deal with food and shelter, to the neglect of offering spiritual assistance. Others are so heavenly minded, as a friend of mine used to say, so heavenly minded that they're no earthly good. They're like Charlie Brown and Linus, wishing the little freezing dog good cheer and moving on. Jesus' dream was that God's will would be done on earth as it is in heaven. That earth and heaven be one in our thinking, in our believing, and in our living. Our hymn is 629. You satisfy the hungry heart, even though it's marked to stand, let's just remain seated and sing this in a prayerful mood. Consecrate us, O Lord, as remembrance of him. For on the night that he was betrayed and gave himself up for us, took bread, gave thanks to you, and broke the bread, and gave it to his disciples, saying, Take, eat, this is my body given for you. Eat this in remembrance of me. When the meal was over, he took the cup and gave thanks to you for it, and gave it to them, saying, This is my blood of the new covenant, poured out for you and for many for the forgiveness of sins. Drink this in remembrance of me. Give us confidence, O God, that we ourselves might know you and know each other better in the breaking of bread and in the sharing of the cup. Holy Spirit of God, sanctify this food for our salvation, and unite us through this bread and unfermented juice to the grape into one body with him who loved us and gave himself for us, namely Jesus, who was the Christ, and who was pointed not to himself, but rather led us to worship and praise only you. In his name we continue in prayer together. O God, we are unworthy to come to this table, but you are merciful and forgiving. As we share this meal, help us to renew our commitment to become more Christ-like. Amen. As always, when we share this sacrament in Methodism, everyone present is welcome to come and participate in it. The understanding is that this isn't the Methodist table, but it's the table of our Lord. And as he offered the first communion to his disciples, even Judas, it seems that who are we to say who can come and who can't? So whoever is with us is always welcome, not just allowed, but welcome to come. So come and share these elements. And my two assistants will make their way down joyfully. 630, Become to Us the Living Bread. Let's stand and sing that together. 630. For the benediction, I again want to point out this thank you note we put in for your gifts over the holidays, and want to let you know we don't take things like that for granted. We're always amazed, and your generosity is just really beyond words. But we thank you. God is our refuge, God is our shelter and our refuge, close at hand at all times.
Knowing that we find hope and peace in the Lord at all times. Amen.